Your house is overheating, and it's not your air conditioner's fault. It's your windows. Right now, up to 76% of the sunlight hitting your windows is turning into trapped heat inside your home. And the system you trust to stop it, your blinds, your shades, your curtains is only blocking about 10 to 15%. That means most of the heat is getting in anyway. Building up in your floors, your walls, and the air you're paying to cool down, you already feel it. The room that becomes unbearable every afternoon, the AC that keeps running but never quite wins, the electric bill that climbs every summer, even though nothing in your house has changed. But here's the part. Almost nobody tells you you're not cool in your home. You're fighting heat that your windows already let in hours ago. And once that heat is inside, it doesn't just disappear. It lingers, it radiates, it turns your living space into something closer to a slow-moving oven than a comfortable home. Your window isn't just letting in light, it's acting like a one-way door that lets heat in and traps it behind glass. So let me ask you something directly. If most of the heat is coming through your windows, and your current setup barely slows it down, why are you still trying to stop it from the inside? Because there is a simple, low-cost solution, often under $20, that can block the majority of that heat before it ever enters your home. No new windows, no expensive upgrades, no complicated installation, but almost nobody uses it. Not because it doesn't work, but because it's placed in the one spot most people never think to look. And once you see where that is, you'll realize your house was never hard to cool. You were just solving the problem on the wrong side of the glass. By 3 p.m., your house starts to change, and you feel it before you even think about it. You walk into the room, and the air feels heavier, thicker, like it's been sitting there absorbing heat all day. The sunlight coming through the window doesn't look intense. But stand a few inches from the glass, and you can feel it pushing warmth into the room. Slowly, constantly, like a heater that never turns off. The floor near the window is warm to the touch. The couch holds on to heat, and the walls radiate it back at you. Your air conditioner kicks on again, trying to keep up, but something feels off. It runs longer, works harder, and still the room doesn't feel right. You lower the thermostat, thinking you're cooling the space, but the heat doesn't leave the way you expect. It lingers, it builds, it wins, and by late afternoon, that one room becomes the place you avoid without even realizing it. Here's the part most people miss you. Think you're cooling your home, but you're actually trying to undo hours of heat that already made it inside. Not minutes ago, hours ago. Starting from the moment the sun hit your windows earlier in the day, and once that heat crosses the glass, it doesn't just pass through, it stays, spreads, and slowly turns your living space into something much harder to control than you think. So the real question isn't why your house gets hot. It's why that heat is getting in so easily in the first place. And once you understand that, everything about the way you've been trying to fix it starts to fall apart. What's happening inside your home isn't random, it's physics. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Sunlight enters your house at shortwave radiation, which glass is almost perfectly designed to let through. That light doesn't feel like heat at first. It looks harmless, even comfortable, but the moment it hits your floor, your furniture, your walls, it changes form. It converts into long-wave infrared heat, and this is where everything shifts. Glass lets sunlight in easily, but it does not let that heat escape the same way. So the energy that entered as light becomes trapped as heat, building up layer by layer inside your home. The air warms, the surfaces store that warmth, and the entire room starts behaving like a sealed system. This is the exact same principle behind a greenhouse, except now your living room is the greenhouse. And the sun is fueling it every single afternoon. That's why the heat doesn't just disappear when the AC turns on. It's not just floating in the air, it's embedded in everything around you. Your floor radiates it back upward. Your couch releases it slowly. Even the walls contribute to holding that energy in place. You're not just cooling air, you're trying to reverse a process that's already been locked in by the structure of your home. And here's where it gets uncomfortable, because it leads directly to the mistake most people make without realizing it. If that's how heat enters and gets trapped inside your home, then the way you're trying to block it after it's already crossed the glass might not just be ineffective. It might be the reason the problem never actually goes away. Now here's the part that flips everything you've been told about blocking heat. Your blinds are not stopping the heat, they're dealing with it after it's already inside. By the time sunlight hits your curtains or shades, it has already passed through the glass, already been absorbed by surfaces, already begun converting into heat that your room can't easily release. What your blinds actually do is intercept that energy too late. And in doing so, they create a new problem most people never notice. The space between your window and your blinds becomes a trapped heat zone, a miniature oven sitting right inside your room. The sunlight hits the blinds absorb part of it, reflect part of it back toward the glass. And everything in that narrow gap starts to overheat. That heat doesn't stay contained. It radiates inward, back into your living space, slowly warming the air you're trying to cool. So instead of blocking heat, your blinds are reorganizing it, holding it, concentrating it, and then releasing it right where you don't want it. This is why the room still feels hot even when the blinds are closed. This is why your AC keeps running longer than it should. You didn't stop the heat, you just delayed when you feel it. And once you see that, it becomes clear why so many homes struggle with temperature control despite doing everything right. So, if the solution you've been relying on isn't actually stopping the problem, then what does the solution isn't more insulation, a stronger AC, or expensive new windows. It's a simple screen placed on the outside of your window. Not inside, not behind the glass, but directly between the sun and the surface, where all of this begins. That single change, moving the barrier from inside to outside, can block up to 70 to 90% of the heat before it ever reaches your glass. And here's what makes this so surprising. It's often the same basic material you already recognize, a mesh screen just placed in a completely different position. No complex system, no hidden technology, no major installation. The difference isn't what it's made of. The difference is, when it does its job, outside the glass, the screen intercepts sunlight early, absorbs part of it, reflects part of it, and lets the rest dissipate into the open air where heat is no longer your problem. Inside the glass, it's too late. Outside the glass, the problem never fully forms. That's the shift most people never consider, and it's why such a small change creates such a massive difference. But here's the part that makes this even more interesting. The effectiveness of this solution has nothing to do with the material itself and everything to do with where it stands. Once you shift the barrier outside, the entire physics of the situation changes. Outside the glass, the screen intercepts sunlight before it becomes heat inside your home. Part of that energy is reflected away, part of it is absorbed by the mesh, and most importantly, in the surrounding air and natural airflow, carry that heat away before it ever touches the window. The glass stays cooler, the surfaces inside never get loaded with heat, and the chain reaction simply never begins. But when that same barrier sits inside, everything happens in reverse. The sunlight has already passed through the glass, already converted into heat, and now it's trapped in a confined space between the window and the blind. There's no airflow to remove it, no escape path for that energy. So it builds up and radiates inward. What you're dealing with isn't prevention, it's containment. And containment always comes at a cost, because now your cooling system has to remove energy that never needed to be there in the first place. So the difference isn't subtle, it's fundamental. Outside, heat is stopped early and removed for free. Inside, heat is trapped and has to be paid for. And when you start to see that difference, not just in theory, but in real, measurable numbers, everything becomes very clear. The difference isn't just theoretical, it shows up clearly when you measure it. In controlled tests, a room with no shading can climb to around 97 degrees Fahrenheit under direct sun. Add interior blinds, and you might bring that down to roughly 90 degrees, but place a screen on the outside of the same window, and the temperature drops to about 75 degrees without changing anything else. Same room, same sun. Same structure, just a different position for the barrier. That's not a small improvement. That's a completely different outcome from the same basic idea. And it lines up with broader data as well. Interior blinds typically reduce solar heat gain by about 10 to 15%, while exterior screens can block 70 to 90% before it ever reaches the glass. You're not tweaking performance, you're changing when and where the heat is handled. Even large-scale simulations across multiple U.S. climates show the same pattern. Homes with exterior shading consistently reduce cooling demand, sometimes by 25 to 50%, depending on location and window direction. The physics holds, no matter where you test it. So when you step back and look at the numbers, the conclusion becomes hard to ignore. This isn't about preference or style, it's about controlling heat at the right stage of the process. But temperature is only part of the story, because once you translate those numbers into what you're actually paying every day, that's when the real impact shows up. Now translate that into dollars, because this is where it stops being abstract. Windows account for roughly 25 to 30% of the energy your home loses every year. And in a typical U.S. household, that can mean $300 to $500 quietly disappearing through glass. Not through your roof, not through your walls, through a surface that might only represent a small fraction of your home, but does a disproportionate amount of damage. And here's the part. Most people don't connect your air conditioner isn't fighting outdoor heat. It's fighting heat your windows already let inside. Every extra cycle, every longer runtime, every spike in your summer bill is tied directly to energy that crossed the glass hours earlier. You're paying to remove something that never needed to be there in the first place. Now compare that to the cost of stopping it early. A basic exterior solar screen setup can run as little as $15 to $30 per window, even less if you do it yourself. For a full house, you might spend a few $100s up front. That's often less than what you lose in a single season. And unlike upgrades that take years to pay off, this one starts working immediately the same afternoon. It's installed. Meanwhile, replacing windows can cost $300 to $800 per unit, easily reaching thousands for a full home. And even then, modern windows still allow a significant portion of solar heat to pass through. So you end up spending more to reduce the problem instead of stopping it at the source. And what makes this even more interesting is that in many parts of the world, people don't have to relearn this at all. They've been building around it from the start. In much of Europe, this isn't a trick or a discovery. It's simply how buildings are designed. In countries like Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, exterior shutters are standard, built into the structure from the beginning. They drop down over the outside of the window, stopping sunlight before it ever touches the glass. In southern regions, like Italy or France, exterior shutters aren't decorative, they're part of daily life, closed early in the day to keep heat out, then opened in the evening to let cooler air in. The heat is controlled before it becomes a problem. Now, compare that to the typical American home. We focus almost entirely on interior solutions, blinds, curtains, shades, treating them as design features rather than functional barriers. The idea of stopping heat outside the window rarely enters the conversation. Instead, we invest in stronger air conditioning, better insulation, or expensive window upgrades, all aimed at dealing with heat after it's already inside. So it's not that the solution doesn't exist, it's that it's not part of the way we've been taught to think about our homes. And when you see how differently other regions approach the exact same problem, it raises a question that's hard to ignore. If this solution has been around for decades and works so effectively, why have you almost never seen it used this way? The answer isn't a hidden secret, and that's exactly why it's so easy to miss. No one is actively hiding exterior shading, but almost no one is promoting it either. Walk into a typical home improvement store, and everything is organized around what goes inside your house. Blinds, curtains, shades, all designed to look good and fit interior spaces. The products that actually stop heat before it enters are there too, but they're scattered, disconnected, and rarely presented as a complete solution. There's no single aisle that says, stop heat at the window before it gets inside. There's no display that shows you the difference between inside and outside placement. So most people never connect the dots, not because they don't care, but because the system isn't designed to make that connection obvious. It's easier to sell something that fits into your living room than something that sits outside your window. And over time, that shapes how we think. We assume the solution must live inside because that's all we ever see. But the reality is simpler and a little more surprising than that assumption. The pieces are already available, the materials are inexpensive, and the concept has been proven over and over again. And if you want to try it for yourself, the way to get started is much easier than you probably expect. Getting started with this doesn't require a contractor, a renovation, or a major investment. For most standard U.S. windows, an exterior solar screen can cost as little as $15 to $30 per window. Using a simple aluminum frame kit and high-density mesh designed to block sunlight, you measure the opening, cut the frame, stretch the mesh across it, and secure it with clips or fasteners. In most cases, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes per window, and once it's in place, it starts working immediately. If you're not sure where to begin, focus on the windows that get hit the hardest. West-facing windows are the priority because they receive low-angle afternoon sun during the hottest part of the day. When outdoor temperatures are already at their peak, that combination, direct sunlight plus maximum heat, is what turns a room into something you avoid every afternoon. Start there, and the difference becomes noticeable faster than you expect. You don't need to do every window at once. Even installing a screen on one or two key windows can change how a room feels by mid-afternoon. This isn't about a full upgrade, it's about placing a simple barrier in the one spot where it actually makes a difference. Of course, this isn't perfect, and pretending it is would miss the point. Exterior screens do come with trade-offs. Depending on the density you choose, they can slightly reduce your outward view, especially with higher performance meshes that block more sunlight. From the outside, they can also change the look of your windows, which may matter if you're concerned about curb appeal or if your neighborhood has strict appearance guidelines. And in some cases, homeowners associations may have rules about what can be mounted on the exterior of a home. There's also a practical balance to consider. A lighter screen might preserve more visibility but block less heat. While a denser screen improves performance at the cost of clarity, you're choosing where you want the trade-off to sit between comfort, visibility, and aesthetics. But here's the key. None of these downsides change the underlying physics. They don't reduce how much heat you're stopping. They only affect how the solution looks and feels. And once you understand that, the decision becomes less about whether it works and more about how you want to use it. Because when you place those trade-offs next to what you're actually gaining, lower indoor temperatures, reduced AC load, and real savings, the picture starts to shift in a very different direction. What makes this more than a comfort upgrade is what heat actually does when it builds up. This isn't just about feeling warm, it's about how sustained indoor heat affects your body, your safety, and your home. During extreme summer conditions, indoor temperatures can rise quickly, especially in rooms that take direct sunlight all afternoon. For older adults, children, and anyone without reliable air conditioning, that heat isn't inconvenient, it can become dangerous. Even if your system is working, the constant strain of fighting trapped heat puts pressure on everything. Your AC runs longer, your home stays warmer than it should, and the environment inside becomes harder to stabilize. Heat isn't just something you feel, it's something your entire living space has to absorb and manage. And that's why this matters beyond savings. Yes, reducing your energy bill is important. Yes, improving comfort changes how you experience your home. But underneath all of that is a simpler reality. The less heat that enters your home, the less risk you carry physically, financially, and structurally. Once you start thinking about it that way, this stops being a small optimization. It becomes a fundamental shift in how you control your environment. So when you look at your home differently, when you stop thinking about cooling as something that happens inside and start thinking about heat as something that should never get in, the entire problem changes. Your air conditioner isn't failing. Your insulation isn't broken. You've just been fighting the wrong battle. In the wrong place, at the wrong time. Every afternoon, the sun hits your windows, and without you noticing, that energy crosses the glass, settles into your space, and becomes something you have to remove later. You feel it as discomfort. You pay for it as electricity. And you repeat the cycle day after day, believing that's just how summer works. But it doesn't have to, because the moment you stop that heat at the surface before it ever touches the glass, you're no longer reacting to the problem. You're preventing it. And prevention is always simpler, cheaper, and more effective than recovery. This was never about finding a more powerful system. It was about placing a simple barrier in the one position where it actually mattered. So the next time your home starts to heat up, don't ask how to cool it faster. Ask why that heat was allowed in at all, because once you answer that question, everything else becomes easier. You don't need to cool the world outside, you just need to stop it at your window.